I'm Penny Macy. I'm an SEN specialist practitioner on the Learning and Communication team.
And my name is Neve, and I am Penny's daughter, and I am autistic, and we do talks about autism and how we kind of got diagnosed and then the strategies we use to help me in life. And it's just complete coincidence that my mum works with kids with autism and then has a daughter with autism. I wasn't diagnosed with autism until I was 15, which is quite unconventional because often autism is diagnosed in boys very early, and girls fly under the radar. Often our talks focus on girls and how their symptoms, I don't want to say that, signs manifest and how it's a bit different, and how they mask a lot and things like that. So some early signs of my autism, I would say a very daydreamy person, but like to the point where I was very unfocused and I never really picked up on cues in my environment. I think I was very in my own world.
You played very well on your own. You always were busy. You liked looking at books and you were very literate.
Yeah, I could basically read when I was 2 years old, like fluently, and I've always felt like an affinity with words and writing and stuff. I've got a very big imagination. Again, that's something that's often not associated with autism. It used to be this case that if you had no imagination, that was more of an autistic sign, but for me, I've always had very vivid internal world.
And lots of repetitive thoughts.
Yes, I had a lot of repetitive like stimming behaviours. Like when I was a kid, I would run around the washing line over and over and over and over again. And I still do kind of have thought spirals, things that kind of I can't shake, and I will get, we call it the blah, so it's something in my head that just will go blah 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 and really throw me off. I was a very anxious child, I would say.
However, at school she had a really good peer group.
I did.
And that was something that protected her in that environment. They all had really good sort of imaginative games they played on the playground, and Neve was always the leader. It sort of masked her difficulties. But when she got to year 5, that's when things started to spiral. A different girl came into the class and changed the dynamics. Mm-hmm. And Neve was very anxious at this time. So we went to CAMS.
So it was kind of like a psychologist.
Yeah.
And I talked to her about things, Margaret.
Yeah.
Hi, if you're
about
watching.
Your OCD and your anxiety. And we discussed lots of different strategies, which we'll cover later on.
Sort of CBT activities that really helped me at the time, because I was really quite depressed, and I remember feeling before we got any help I felt I was in a hole and I couldn't really get out. I remember vividly telling you that, and I just couldn't. It's the only way I could articulate it. And it was also the first time I'd really been properly bullied as well by this girl that came into the school, so I didn't know how to like interpret that because I'd never been bullied before and I couldn't read her at all. And I also would hyper focus on my special interest. So my special interest is, since about the age of 10, has been The Sims 2, a computer game that I just love to pieces. And if I go on that game, I literally will not come off it.
She went through a phase of doing things all through the night because that was just the quiet time where she could really focus on her activities.
I liked it when it was quiet and dark and still, and I could just like focus on things, because otherwise the world was too loud. I went to high school and
still no diagnosis.
Yeah.
It was really traumatic, really, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Neve couldn't concentrate, so what she used to do was sit in the lesson and then bring it home with her and do it at home because she couldn't concentrate within the lesson. There were people flicking pens, interrupting,
chucking stuff,
being unpredictable. Everything was just a bit of a sensory overload at school, to be honest.
And it was from all angles of my senses. So like sound, it was always really noisy. Smell, like the cafeteria. Proprioception, is that the word? Where it's like your sense of space around you, like people just in my space all the time. And I felt really like everyone knew what they were doing but me. And I didn't really have any friends in high school either. Like I kind of drifted between groups, but I never really like fitted into one group. And then when I was about 15, I was just like, we're done with this sort of anxiety. The anxiety got so bad.
I think CAMS and school liaised, and the school wanted Neve to have a diagnosis.
Well, I was seeing a lady at school at this point, and this was something that really helped me actually. This was really good practice. I don't know what her job title was, but she would be within the high school and in like the reception area, and I could go and like speak to her whenever I felt anxious, and we'd book in advance, which I really liked because it was planned and predictable.
The way you booked was not by phone or verbally, it was actually by email.
I hate being on the phone.
Yeah.
Thing is, I can do it, but I completely lose what I'm saying. I've got ADHD as well. It means I completely lose track of what I've just said, or like I can't concentrate and listen to the other person. So yeah, emailing has always really helped. So I would email her and then we'd have a chat whenever I planned, and it was really nice because it was offloading the source of anxiety at the source. It would make school seem less scary. I was talking it through with someone in the school environment, if that makes sense.
Because actually when you're at home as a parent, it's really difficult to be able to help Neve.
So at high school, I was masking a lot. Masking has now been shown to be not just in girls, but in boys with autism as well. A strategy that you don't even realise you're doing, and it's to sort of mask your symptoms and make you seem like a neurotypical person. You would hide your stims, you would try and behave in a way that's socially acceptable, so like you'd laugh at everything even if it's not funny, and like make small talk and stuff. But the thing with that is that it's extremely draining for an autistic person, because that's not their natural set point, that's not like what they want to do. So I was doing that the entire time at high school, and it was really stressful. So as soon as I would get home, I would explode in my mum's face in the car, be like, I hate school, I hate doing this, basically have a meltdown. It happened every day basically. And I think when I had the lady at school that I could talk to, it relieved that pressure. I mean, meant that when I went home, I wasn't exploding in my mum's face and causing like family sort of
It released
tension.
the pressure at home as well. So, but still, Neve would have to come home, take her clothes off because they smelt like school. She'd have to go to her room. She'd have to decompress.
I still do that now when I come home from work. I have to take my uniform off. I'm like, nope, can't have this on. I have to like completely like separate myself from the environment. I need to be in my own home, in my own element.
Your safe space.
Yeah, and sit in the same place and eat the same things. I'm a very routine-based person. I didn't actually know a lot about autism at this point, I would say. I kind of had the very cliched idea about it, that it was like boy geniuses and all this. I looked up the signs because I can't remember who recommended looking it up. I think it might have been my lady I was seeing at CAMS. So I looked up the list of signs and I basically ticked every single box and I couldn't believe it. I think at the time though, because 15 years old, you don't really want to be labelled. You're like, I'm a teenager, you know, you don't want to have that sense of being boxed in. You want to
fit in with everybody else, don't you?
I wasn't fully on board with the label of autism, and I wasn't really, like, I was aware I probably was autistic, but it wasn't fully realised as something I wanted to, like, call myself.
It took you till about 20, didn't it, for you to really take on board?
Oh wait, this is actually a very big part of me, and this is how I understand the world, and it's actually very helpful to me personally. I know some people don't like the label, but for me it really helps me feel like less alone and less odd generally. And often I'll do things and I'll be like, well, now I kind of, that's why, because of the autism.
You're not neurotypical.
Yeah, exactly. So the label's kind of grown on me over time, but yeah, we received a diagnosis via CAMS.
Yeah, and they didn't want to diagnose, but they felt that Neve would benefit from having a diagnosis.
The reason they didn't want to diagnose is because at the time they used a criteria called the triad of impairment, which was basically like social skills, repetitive behaviours and imagination or something like that. It didn't fit me entirely because obviously I've got a very big imagination and I can cope
and you've
socially.
Got good literacy skills as well.
Yeah, I was on the surface doing okay. I was getting really good grades and stuff, but the anxiety was sort of
off the scale.
So they diagnosed me with autism, and it took me a while to come to terms with that label. My ADHD was diagnosed largely on the back of not being able to sleep. I've always had ADHD, because when they diagnosed it, they were saying, oh, like, have you always been really inattentive? I was like, yes, basically all my whole life. Yeah, I went through a week of like no sleep, which was horrendous. Then they kind of went down this route of like, why is this happening? Because there was no other reason for it. So I had ADHD diagnosed as well, and it's quite interesting that I have both, because as standalone disorders, is that what they call them? Diagnoses, they are very different, but they kind of work together in my experience.
And then you were able to access more strategies within the school environment, like quiet areas, somewhere to go to decompress if you felt stressed. extra time to finish exams if you wanted, and sitting at the back of the room in exams so that it didn't feel like someone was breathing down your neck.
Yeah, I didn't like the feeling of other people behind me in the exam hall, and everyone was sitting alphabetically, and I was the only one not sitting alphabetically. And I think I was the only person that noticed, because that's a very autistic thing to just notice a pattern that's gone wrong. But yeah, the positive experiences from being diagnosed were that I could get extra support and help when I needed it, particularly kind of anything to do with deadlines. So I had extended deadlines as well. When I got to uni, I was like, I definitely need this, because I was having the panic attacks all the time. For context, at uni, I lived at home as well. I couldn't live independently at that point.
She has to choose things to study that she's really interested in, because if she hasn't got an interest in it, it's impossible for Neve to study it.
Absolutely impossible. And if I do it, and I think loads of people say this, crawling through the mud, I can't do it. It's like absolutely impossible. It has to be something I'm really interested in and passionate about.
I say just put something on the paper, anything.
But I can't even do that. It's just, it's awful. Peers-wise, so this is a long-standing thing. I don't really have
Don't
friends.
mention groups.
No.
Or group work.
No. Anything to do with teams, anything to do with working in a group, like say in a classroom.
Clubs.
Yeah, in a classroom, if they're like pair up and do something, that is like the worst thing I could think of in my life. I can't function. Like I had to do it at uni, like maybe twice. I had to do a kind of a project with someone else, and it was like the worst grades I got. I can't combine my thoughts with another person unless we're very similar or like on the same page, which has never happened really. I can't work in a pair, I can't work in a group. I can't do that. So if there's the option of kind of letting someone work on their own, or even pick their partner, if you really have to work in a group, then that would be ideal for an autistic person, I think. So environments that made a difference to my life, I would say having your kind of safe space is really important. So for me, that was my bedroom, a place I would sit in the kitchen, which is basically where I lived. A bit like, I know it's very stereotypical, The Big Bang Theory, but Sheldon's spot. I have a spot. Just knowing that you can retreat to somewhere quiet and calm after like the overwhelming sensory thing of the day is
and
good.
having ear defenders and earphones on buses, that helped, doesn't it?
Regarding like medication, so I was diagnosed with medications for ADHD when I had that diagnosed, but they didn't do anything. They kind of made me feel like a zombie. I know everyone says that, but it felt like it deleted the interesting part of my personality, so no thanks. And then I went on just normal anxiety medication, and I'm still on that, and that actually really helps take the edge off. I know not everyone's a big fan of medication, and I can understand that, absolutely. We put it off for ages.
Yeah, we
were,
did.
because obviously, like, if I'd known it would be this beneficial, I would have done it ages ago. But like, we tried everything. Like,
we did
literally every single thing you can think of, and like the anxiety was still not great. Yeah, so medication really helped me a lot. It just took the edge off. It went from 100 to like 50%.
We can talk about other strategies as well.
Yeah.
So we used like how she felt, 1 to 10. What was making the anxiety, and how we could go about making it less.
When I was having a panic attack or like an anxiety episode, it was rating it on 10. And I think the goal was to see like your body can't physically sustain anxiety for a very long time, or like even if it can, like it does go down eventually. So it was sort of like checking in with yourself and making sure that you know that you're going down a level, and then that decreases your anxiety because you know that you're getting less anxious generally. And then, also it helps to rate it on a scale, because autistic people love sort of numerical data. What other methods did we do?
Well, we used to do things like go to your quiet room and do something that you really like for 10 minutes.
Go play Sims.
Or read a book, and like do a bit of meditation, really.
Yeah. Another thing I thought of, it's not really a method, but it's something that we did do, was like, I don't like attention on me, which is ironic because I've got a YouTube channel, but like I generally hate any sort of focus on me. So if I know someone's going to be looking at me, like in a big crowd or something, I get so anxious. So if I needed to be coming out of a classroom to visit the lady that I was booking a session with at school, we kind of made it known that I didn't want the attention on me particularly. Like, didn't want to pick me out of the crowd. So like, if a teacher wants to ask students a question, the best option is not to force the autistic person to answer, because if we're put on the spot, like, I know everyone hates that, but like I genuinely would just shut down, and I'm not able to like function if I know that the attention's on me.
And also warnings, so telling me that I am going to have some friends around the house helped. So I'd say in 2 days' time.
This is mum's friends, not my friends.
And then
because
if
I didn't have friends.
If they popped round unexpectedly, they would shout through the letterbox, "It's only me!"
Yeah, because I hate
warn Neve.
anything unpredictable. I hate, so I need to like know if there's any sort of change in the immediate environment. So particularly if it's people related, so if there's going to be people that I don't really know or like only know a bit, I don't really want them in my space or whatever.
Planning and lists are good, and also having a crib sheet at work. So say it's like something in science where you have to dissect something, having it written down on a crib sheet in an order, numerical order, what to do at each step, is also really helpful.
Or if I did food tech, I need like the most basic instructions in order to cook, because even something like whisk, I'll be like, how do I whisk? What is a whisk? If I'm not interested in it, I'm not going to understand it or like want to learn about it. So even something really basic and common sense, like how do I even turn the oven on? Like stuff like that, I need to have really written out. So in food tech, it was a bit of a nightmare if I didn't have written instructions, because I'd just be like, I don't know what I'm doing. And everyone else seems to just know. It feels like everyone's got the manual but me. That's what it felt like.
Yeah, and Neve has time issues, so alarms set reminds her that she does have to be leaving the house to get to the bus stop on time.
And I need to factor in the fact that I need a lot more time to do stuff than I think I do. If I think something's going to take 5 minutes, it's not. It's going to take like half an hour.
Yeah.
And that's for a combination of reasons, but mostly because I'm a perfectionist as well.
You don't like to waste time.
Yeah, I don't like to waste time, and I'm a perfectionist, so... And I think that's quite an autistic thing as well. Basically, I think that's kind of a curse and a blessing, because I don't want something to go be submitted or whatever unless it's completely perfect, whatever that means. It just takes me a long time to do stuff. And also a thing that really helps is technology generally. I really like computers, technology like apps and things. So if I want to get public transport, I don't have to handle like smelly money, like actual physical cash. Thankfully, post-pandemic, no one really uses cash anymore. But I don't like paying money, so I never really like the smell or the texture of it. It's just horrible. Paying for a bus on an app.
Also, if you're anxious, your mental maths goes out the window, because you can't think straight, and so you just think, oh, I can't.
Yeah, exactly. You're right. Oh yeah, maps. So I like Google Maps because of planning, and also it's really helpful because even now it does a thing where you can see inside a place. They're doing this thing now.
Really?
So say instead of just the road, it's usually for shops or whatever, someone will have taken a photo in the shop and you can actually see in the shop. So that's quite handy as well, because then you know exactly what it's going to look like inside.
What you have trouble with is imagining what to expect. That's your theory of mind, isn't it?
Yeah, my theory of mind is terrible.
Yeah.
I don't really have one, if I'm being honest. Like, I don't ever know what to expect ever in a situation that I'm not used to.
With relationships and people and conversation, and not with going places, and that's why you over-plan everything. And also that when you plan in advance, you always have to think something different may happen. Say, for example, the bus is cancelled. We always talk about having a plan B, and just what to do if the bus is cancelled. Have a plan B.
And that used to be sort of a problem for me, because I never used to make plan Bs, or if I did, I would forget them because I'd panic. But I think over time I've kind of built up my resilience.
And it's important to remember to do things in small steps.
Yes.
Not just to tackle a whole big issue, but just break it down into small steps and tackle that issue in small steps.
Another thing that's really helped is exercise for me. I always forget to mention that, but it's one of the most important parts of sort of my mental health, really. It really does help me, and I started doing that when I was about 15-ish. And it was a journey, because I didn't really understand what I was doing. I started going to a local gym before I went to like a more popular gym or whatever, and like built my way up. Actually, no, I worked out in the basement for like 2 years, and then on my very first run, I took it seriously. I thought that running was running 110%, not just like jogging, because I took it literally. I thought you didn't really jog. So I got all my kit on, and then I disappeared, and I came back like a minute later, and Mum was like, opened the door. I was completely red and like overwhelmed and like and it was because I just ran full pelt for a minute rather than just jog.
Yes, well,
It's the quickest run in the world.
and having just more time to shadow people and learn through watching what they do.
Yes, I need a lot more time. That's actually something I said at work. So when I have to do something new or like a new activity, I need to like specifically requested that I need to have at least like 2 more weeks of like shadowing because it won't. My processing time, I think I'm going to do a video on this. The main issue I seem to have, among the other things I'm talking about, is my processing. It feels like I've got a supercomputer with too much stuff in it.
Yeah.
So
and
like
it's filtering it out.
It may be
what's
quick.
Useful.
Yeah, I've got a quick mind, but there's so much stuff in it. I can't filter the data.
Yeah.
So I'm taking in too much data all the time. So when I have to encounter something new, the processing time for me is so slow. And I think just like acknowledging the fact recently that my processing is so slow, it's really helped me like be less harsh on myself. I can't process new information very easily. Yeah. And it takes a lot of repetition to get it in my head.
And we wanted to say that everyone's experience of autism is individual, and that just because you have a label of autism doesn't mean to say you fit into neurotypical idea of criteria. It's a bit like a thumbprint. Everyone's individual. So just because someone who has autism comes to your class doesn't mean to say they're like every other person who's had autism. They all have their own individual way of living, of being.
I love that because it's true, everyone's got a different fingerprint,
but we're all humans, but we just have a different fingerprint from everybody else.
Exactly, so you can't like sort of mass apply these things to everyone. Like no, not everyone's going to have these traits to these extremes. So for instance, my sensory issues are quite high, like I get that quite strongly. Other people that are autistic have the opposite and they don't have any they need a lot of sensory input to even feel grounded. This is just our one,
and this is our one, and we hope that our strategies will help.
I've come quite far.
Yes, she's done very well,
if I do say so myself. I do live independently. I live with my boyfriend who cooks for me. So I have lived at home basically till I was 26.
Because emotionally, really, you were really delayed with your emotional development.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until you got into your earlier mid-20s that it sort of felt like emotionally you were able to be more independent.
It's almost like I just developed more slowly in that respect.
Maybe it's your processing then, maybe. It's just taking on. But also, you know, the blah can just reoccur at any moment. You know, something will send Neve off into a bit of a spin. And we just have to revisit all the strategies that we had before and hope for the best.
It's important to just remember that it's transient, like it's not going to be like that forever.
And sometimes you will just have a bad blip, and that's just the way life is. And I was going to say, as a parent, it's really important not to have a knee-jerk reaction to the blip.
Don't try and like solve it immediately, because, or maybe some people do want that, but me personally, I think a lot of the time it's more emotional sort of support that I need rather than like practical support. So that's all of the strategies, I think.
Well, not all of them, but as many as we can remember.
Breathing bubbles. What's that?
Don't know.
Thank you for watching. I hope that you all learned something, and my name's Neve and I have a YouTube channel and it's good.
Well, thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening, and I hope you learned something new and now know how to help the autistic people in your life, because we're all different but there are some overriding similarities. Okay, bye.